Heartland Research Group, consisting of more than 20 professionals, have gathered together outside of Montrose, Iowa. They are searching for the place where Alma's army crossed the River Sidon during the harvest of 87 BC. The Battle of Zarahemla is the most complete account with respect to space and time as any other event found in the Book of Mormon. Wayne May, publisher of Ancient American Magazine, explains why they believe Zarahemla is located on the other side of the river from Nauvoo.
In 2010, I was able to locate a potential site for the temple of Zarahemla. And of course, if that's the case, there would be a city there also. But it was directly across from the Nauvoo temple on the west bank of the Mississippi River, which is exactly what it's supposed to be. If the Mississippi River is indeed River Sidon, it has to be on the west bank of the major river, and it fulfills that part of the scripture. So in so doing, once that was located, I hired a fellow by the name of Charlie Christensen who came out with his electronic gear called resistivity, and we shot the location. And in doing so, we found a tremendous rectangular structure sitting there right on the ground, and I was very excited because also the whole place is surrounded with earth berms that match the berms built by the ancient Hopewell culture of North America. So the Hopewell culture of North America are indeed the people that I line up with to be potential for the Nephites. They fit in the timeline, though. They begin very strongly at 550 BC, and the general end date for them across the country by the academics is 400 AD. So I mean, the time fit is just absolutely practically perfect. And based on that, what we see at this site across from the Nauvoo temple, I can say with what we've done in the other testing since that time, is that we have a very potential site for a Hopewell temple. And if that indeed is a Hopewell temple site, it could very well indeed be the Zarahemla temple. And which I think I have to say, at this point, I believe that it is, because of Doctrine and Covenants 125 and 3, when Joseph was commanded to build another location of the temple across from the Nauvoo on the opposite side of the river.
The expedition begins on the riverboat Truth, with team members utilizing sonar technology to scan the bottom of the Mississippi River. Wayne May and Cal Christensen previously identified 3 possible locations where Alma's army crossed the river on the morning of the second day during the Battle of Zarahemla.
In the end, we'll have a map showing the exact depth and bottom features, whether it's muddy or rocky or trees or shipwreck or whatever we find. And we're looking for areas that would be shallow enough back before the time of Christ to have walked across the river.
I've been in the data collection business for about 6 years. I kind of started in 2014 as really just an idea and something that I thought would be fun to do. And we started taking pictures out of airplanes, and pretty quick we saw that we needed something better than a Canon point-and-shoot camera. So we hooked up. Actually, one of the first people that I hooked up with was Dr. Kevin Price, and he was working for a company called AgPixel back in 2014. And he took me under his wing and introduced me to photogrammetry and aerial imagery and the science behind it. And that led me down a path to pursue a lot of different opportunities when it came to taking pictures from the air. So in a long roundabout way, Dr. Price introduced me to John Lefgren and the Heartland Group and everybody who I'm here with now. So 2 or 3 years ago, we hooked up with a diving company who did a lot of hydrographic work, and they taught me some of the basics for bathymetry surveys and sonar and the kind of mapping that we're doing here today. And so it was a kind of a natural transition from aerial imaging and mapping to underwater. The principles are somewhat the same. The techniques are a little bit different, but in the end, we're producing a map of something that you can't see with your eyeballs. So we measure the bottom, we measure the depth of the water, and then we have the side imaging and down imaging that kind of paint a picture of what's going on beneath the surface. What I'd like to do is run this west shoreline all the way down to our first area, and that'll follow the map that Robert E. Lee made.
As the sonar scanning continues, Dr. John Lefgren sits down with Wayne May, Mike Baker, and Dr. Kevin Price to discuss the expedition.
In the history of American military officers, there are only a few that come to the caliber of Robert E. Lee. He's assigned to Washington, D.C. because he's so smart. He's like 26 years old. And he doesn't like the desk job. He wants to get out and do something. So Robert E. Lee gets a job. His boss is in charge of engineering in Washington, D.C. for the United States Army.
Yes.
He wants to get out, and he comes up there, sets up a camp. Guess what he does? He spends as much time in this water mapping, making a survey as he did commanding the Confederate Army. A map that still is a marvel today. It's in the United States National Archives.
Tremendous work.
Tremendous work.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of soundings. Now, what's a sounding?
That's where they determine the depth from the top of the surface of the water down to the rock below, and they get that depth bouncing back and forth. And of course, they're trying to deal with the rapids. They're trying to find a way to increase here, because the Mississippi River is everything to this country for shipping. And right now, the rapids is a real problem because it's in the way.
In the 19th century, there was no other piece of land that was surveyed as much as this land. They spent 3 years drawing a very incredible survey, and from that survey, we can then know the depth of the water.
That's correct.
And we know what? That Alma's army crossed the riverside
On foot.
on foot.
Yes, without boat.
So now they're over there in a camp on the first night, and they're going to have to come over here. Why are they coming here?
Well, what they've done, the first day, the battle took place primarily on the hill Amnihu, which is behind the Nauvoo Temple and runs this whole area down to these points where the valleys empty into the river. And then, of course, the Lamanites, the Amlicites are in retreat. They scoot across first, but Alma stops and they camp right here. But what he does is he sends off spies to follow the Amlicites, because they cross a little further down, a different area. But he camps here. And I think he does that because he needs to get word from the spies, because he has no idea for sure what's happening over at Zarahemla. And that's the capital of the nation.
Let me put you in charge of 30,000 Nephites. I'm going to give you the title of chief judge, and you are the commander of the army. How would you manage this thing? You got to get the main problem is Zarahemla.
Well, the reality is in combat, the biggest foe you have to overcome is logistics. Because you have the men and the material are one thing, but getting all of the supplies and getting the men to the battle, to the front, that's why when I look at this, I look at it from a perspective of, we get in our car and we drive 10 minutes and we've gone, 10, 15 miles. But when you're on foot, we forget sometimes that, everything that you do over uneven terrain and carrying your what we refer to as battle rattle, all your weapons of war, your gear and your material, it's a lot, and you don't move nearly as fast, and we tend to forget about that in modern society. But it's, when I look at the terrain here, and you think about the movement of all these forces, it puts into more perspective. You have to take into consideration of the terrain. And that's, when I'm looking at it from that perspective, as trying to identify spots. Like these hills that are behind us, as Wayne was saying, you know, we're looking for the areas that would be the most prominent, likely places that somebody would fight.
I have a question for you. 2,000 years ago, there was a city of 100,000 people. Is it possible that nothing has been left for us to discover from such a large city?
No,
The city will be found.
there will be something there for sure.
You're sure?
Oh yeah, you can't have that kind of disturbance on the land and not have something there.
So you think that Zarahemla is still in the ground?
I do. Boy, the topsoil, it's not going to just be back there.
So the plants is sort of a memory book of history.
They are one of the best indicator we've got of what's happened on that land in the past.
And do you think these plants will tell us something about Zarahemla?
They already are. We've been able to see the temple site from the plants already in the area where we believe the city of Zarahemla was.
Now, you know our friends in Germany claim that magnetometry is a good technology.
That's right.
But the plants will get us in the right area and the magnetometry will give us what?
Well, the plants will help us pick, fine-tune down. It's like sieving or it's like looking in a funnel. You don't want to start with the big funnel and try to take the magnetometer over that whole big area because it's too time-consuming and it's an inexpensive technology. So what we want to do is we want to hone in on the areas where we want to focus with that magnetometer and really make sure that the data we collect there will be highly productive for us in finding things under the ground before we start doing any kind of digging.
At the proposed Zarahemla temple site, Wayne Maid takes the opportunity to talk with visitors about the area and how he has determined many of the proposed locations. He also shares experiences such as the potential discovery of the place of arms.
So at the place of arms, we picked out a likely spot. It's, you know, way out there to the east, but not too far. And so we're looking down at the river
By the
where the highway would be, where you would approach, and we're looking at this plain, and here's this big hill, and at the top of the hill, we see trees, but we see that the trees are growing uneven. They look like the tail of a dragon. Well, we get up there, here's these berms with these openings, like you see in Ohio.
Yeah.
And they're running all the way across. I'm saying, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And then behind there, everything kind of swoops down to an excellent place of entrance in my estimation. So we go to the first farm, we want to get permission to walk the place. The guy says, oh, it's my dad's, he's across the highway. We go over to the guy, knock on the door, and this guy comes out, and right away we said, sir, we're history enthusiasts, and we like to walk your land looking for Indian things. And right away he starts cussing a blue streak like a drunk sailor. I mean, it was not pleasant. And we thought he was mad at us. We were going to get thrown off his porch, you know. Mm-hmm. And then he settled down and he said, that hill right there where you want to walk, that cost me $250,000. And we're saying, okay, what's the deal? Well, he said, state of Illinois, you see that nice new road you guys drove up on? He said, well, they bought my hill for gravel and sand fill to build this lovely new road. And they got here with all their equipment. The first day, 2, 3, 4 scoops of the ground up there, bone and pottery came out of the earth.
Oh,
Everything stopped. In comes the archaeologist. They take samples all over the top of the hill by my bumps. They found stuff everywhere. Shut them down. He had to give the money back.
Recently, people have become aware of the health benefits from a plant that Dr. Kevin Price discovered growing on the Zarahemla temple site, Monerta punctata, commonly known as spotted bee balm. At the end of the expedition, volunteers harvested 13 pounds of fresh plant material directly from the center of the sand mound that is the foundation of the Zarahemla temple. The plant was flown to Utah where its essential oils were extracted within 24 hours. It was then hand-delivered to a laboratory which specializes in gas chromatography and mass spectrometry analyses to certify its chemical composition and purity. Dana Young, essential oil expert and president of Bee Young Total Health, explains why this plant is so unique.
Well, the composition that we've seen on this plant so far and what I smell and what I've tasted is high in a compound called phenols. Phenol is a class of chemical compositions that if you put it in a quadrant, 4 quadrants, so you got 4 boxes, a middle line and a vertical line on 4 quadrants, the chemical classes will fall in those different quadrants. And the phenol group is right down here in the bottom, which is super antiviral, anti-inflammatory, anti-infectious, antibacterial, and has a very calming and relaxing effect on the body. And that's what we know from that chemical classification. We know from research that's been done on this plant in China, now it's a different location, so it could have different chemical compounds, that the thymol content is up in the 70%. Thyme oil, that compound is only in the 60s. So if this is higher than thyme oil, it's kind of exciting because Dr. John LaPraz said carbachol and thymol, no known bacteria can live in the presence of those 2 compounds. So that's kind of exciting.
Back by the river's edge, Mike Baker and John Lefgren meet with Don Bloom, an engineer with 40 years of experience blasting rock and moving silt to control the flow of the Mississippi River under permits that were issued by the Corps of Engineers.
So you know the rocks of the Mississippi?
This part, yes, this limestone.
This is
Churty limestone.
Keokuk limestone.
Keokuk Churty limestone, yeah. It's the hard part of the limestone.
Do you think it's possible for us to find some of this ledge where the Army crossed?
It is very, yeah, it's a very possibility. The only thing that we may have to look at is with the different locks that were put in there.
There's only there were 3 locks, though. There were 3
locks, yeah. The silt that builds up and backs up over the years, how deep that might be. We'll just have to look at that. If we can get a clear area from the water down to the limestone rock and figure the width of that, then we're in business.
Out on the river, the excitement builds as the team discovers what they were hoping to find.
What we've seen is a very wide area of 10, 11 foot depths that stretches pretty much from where we are now up almost a mile.
10 foot, 11 foot, 12 foot.
So when you say 12 foot, then without the dam, we'd be about 2 feet.
That's right, to the sand. But we feel this right now is the place that the crossing actually took place in the Book of Mormon, where the Nephite army on day 2 would cross to follow after the Amlicites, who would have crossed here on day 1.
We are very happy with the results so far. Better than ever could have been expected.
As the expedition concludes, the efforts of the team during the past week have paid off. The Heartland Research Group has scientifically located a possible crossing area for Alma's army. This discovery paves the way for future expeditions. They invite you to join with them in the search for the lost city of Zarahemla.